Hello, this is S.K. Williams, and today I would like to talk to you about politics. We are in what is perhaps the most unusual election year in U.S. history. There aren't many advertisements. There have been debates, a few people have yard signs, but not as much as normal, and it hasn't been as pervasive in the United States as it typically is. In large part, this is due to the lockdown and the great plague of 2020 that we are all made aware of and must guard against. But 2020 has proven to be a year that is unprecedented in human history. A year that, in many ways, I'm glad to have seen, for it is truly a remarkable year of history. It will no doubt go down in the history books. Though I do wonder if the world remains 1,000 years hence, if it will be remembered, or even 500 years hence, or 300 years hence, or even just 100 years hence. Because as extraordinary as this year is, it is not glamorously extraordinary. History is made by the extraordinary, but popular history is made by the glamorously extraordinary. Even things that are more typically mundane, like wars, will grab people's attention better than that which is vastly more unusual, and even vastly more impactful than a war. Because in a war you have soldiers fighting for their countries and their causes, doing battle with others, struggling. You have a clear set of people fighting, teams you could root for, perhaps even in your minds a clear-cut good versus evil. You have goals to accomplish, missions to do, and death on all sides, and men throwing their lives away for the benefit of others. And by throw away I do not mean waste, I mean sacrifice. Wars, as awful and terrible as they really are also glorious. They are glamorous. They are remembered. And there is good cause for this. The men who fight the wars must show courage and valor. But what courage and valor is there in wearing a face mask or not going out? While I would not venture so far as to call these measures cowardice, I would note that there is no courage involved, no valor. And yet, the quarantine and lockdowns will do vastly more damage to the economy than any war, other than a full-scale war, perhaps a world war, would do. And the implementation of new policies and even new laws, the reshaping of governments, and the possible great reset that they are discussing, could have far more long-lasting ramifications that permanently alter history than most wars would ever possibly be. Granted, there are some wars fought over such ideals and that become so great in people's minds that they too redirect history, World War II being one of the most notable, but World War I was not. World War I was such a great conflagration that it reshaped the world history. It was used by world powers to reshape things. But the popular imagination was never gripped by it like they were World War II. And as a result, it never shaped the thinking as did World War II. But this year we may see an entirely new humanity being reshaped, and even if not directly by the measures taken here or the narrative spun here, it is being used to reshape the way the governments of the world and other agencies present things, and could very easily reshape our culture in a way that is much more subtle, but that the powers that be nevertheless want us to be like. It is being used as a vehicle for far more long-term changes and long-reaching new policies and cultural ideas than most wars ever had. Indeed, not since the Cold War has such an event occurred, and yet during the Cold War we had people on two sides. Now we have a world singing almost in unison in terms of the governments and other agencies. And I think living through it, we have that impending sense that all of this is happening. And what is a presidential election next to this? Politics is an important matter. It deals with how our society arranges itself. Contrary to the popular philosophy that we advocate, the way we govern ourselves as a society influences how that society views itself and has a profound influence on the individual members of that society. I'm not saying every single specific individual will be affected in exactly the same way as each other individual. I myself am a unique exception since I reject modern values. I am a monarchist, for example, so I reject republicanism, and being an American, that is very unusual. Nevertheless, the majority of people are not. But have you noticed, the American culture and society doesn't just think that a republic is a better form of government than a monarchy and leave it at that. There's an undergirding philosophy that acts as a foundation for that government, that justifies that government, and that philosophy influences how we understand our own lives and how we live them. The American philosophy is, of course, derived from Freemasonry. This is not a secret. Many of America's founders are confirmed Freemasons, and others are suspected, especially Thomas Jefferson and James Madison. Of these two, James Madison being the one with the most actual evidence to suggest he was a Mason, though there is no clear smoking gun of it. There is simply a letter congratulating him to his ascension to a lodge, albeit this letter may have been written in mistake. Perhaps Madison never joined a lodge, and someone merely believed he did. Still, the letter exists, and acts as at least circumstantial evidence that Madison was indeed a Mason. Jefferson has long been listed as a Freemason in Freemasonic materials and other historical sources, but there is no absolute and clear and definitive evidence that Mr. Jefferson was a Mason. But it doesn't really matter if he was or wasn't. Enough of America's founders were Freemasons, and even those that we have no evidence for probably contain many members who themselves were also Masons. And even those who were not Masons were nevertheless influenced by the philosophy, because Freemasonry had a powerful cultural impact. To look at Jefferson again, even if he was not a Mason, he was a devotee of the philosophy of John Locke, and The Freemasons derived a lot of their own philosophy from John Locke, who himself was a member of a secret society that was a bit of a precursor to Freemasonry. Locke was not a Freemason because the Freemasons did not actually exist in their current form, at least, until 1707. Secret societies existed, esoteric and occult societies existed, societies that promoted much the same belief systems existed, but Freemasonry did not truly exist until 1707. Locke, of course, died before then, but he was still a member of a few secret societies, and these societies are the ones that merged and continued and progressed until they eventually became Freemasonry. And the Freemasons very clearly derive their philosophical background from other sources which include Locke. They also include the Kabbalah, which is a form of Jewish mysticism, and other philosophical works. There is no one single thing that Freemasonry is based upon. But the reason I bring this up is because Jefferson was such a devotee of Locke that he himself said his words were as if Locke wrote them, that everything he said was derived from Locke. And if Freemasonry derived its beliefs, at least in part, from Locke, we can definitely see the overlap. As such, to be an American is, in effect, to be a Freemason. I don't mean that in the literal sense. I don't mean every American is a member of a lodge somewhere, or that you have to join a lodge to gain the rights of an American or citizenship in America. But the values that Freemasons promote are the values that are upheld in American culture and society. And they are the philosophical underpinnings of the government. They affect how we live and what we view as moral and what we view as immoral, and how we believe that we should operate within a society. Americans do not like in their private life to bow and kneel. They like to think of themselves as free. I contest this idea that Americans are free or ever have been free, but that doesn't really matter. What matters is, the way America is governed has deeply influenced the way Americans see things and approach things. And the same is true of Europe, which is currently in the process of dismantling its ancient cultures and replacing it with something based upon the Enlightenment ideals of the French and American revolutions, which are one and the same revolution as far as I am concerned. They are both Freemasonic. And the reason I note this is because after the plague, we may very well have a new culture that emerges based upon new values. Values shaped by men such as... I can't use his name for fear of censorship on channels that are not so free, so I will simply call him William Portal. I think we all know who I'm talking about, really. William Portal is probably not acting alone. More than likely there is a group of wealthy and powerful men and women who are of like mind and similar motives, who are all working together to reshape the society according to their ideals. Their ideals are also derived from Freemasonry, but not all of us Masons have the same interpretation, much like any other religion, like Christianity, and how Catholics and Protestants disagreed, and how Protestant denominations disagree, and how a Reformed Church does not get along with what they have termed to be Armenian. In other words, disagreements exist, but there is still a core that is what it is derived from, and that is a commonality. Those who struggle against the new global paradigm are themselves adherents of the same basic philosophy as those attempting to build it. They don't realize that, but they are. They simply have a different interpretation and have their own elements that they added or subtracted to it, and they disagree with details, mere details on the outside. Nevertheless, we all know that our world is being reshaped. We all know our values are being reshaped, and we all know it's coming from the top down. And with this sense of impending control, with this sense of global domination, what is a presidential election? The President of the United States isn't the most powerful man in the world today. William Portal is. And it is William Portal who is getting things done. And it seems few defy William Portal. We are indeed living in interesting times. Times that we should perhaps meditate upon. But times, nevertheless, that can be exhilarating and offer opportunities that we did not have before. I haven't much else to say. This is a casual reflection. I shall, I believe, end this dialogue. I hope that it has had some meaning to someone out there somewhere. I shall talk, perhaps, at greater length or of greater detail about these topics later. But for now, I simply put these thoughts out there. And I take my leave. Thank you. God bless, and goodbye.